Welcome to Interviewing the Legends. Here's your host, Ray Shasho.
Cardinal Black, the Welsh-formed trio of frontman Tom Hollister, guitarist Chris Buck, and drummer Adam Roberts, take their monumental steps. The announcement of their new album, Midnight at the Valencia, which is out May 23rd on 30 Tigers. Alongside the album news, the band has unveiled their brand new single, Keep On Running. Midnight at the Valencia feels like a document of the band's 10,000 hours, the dive bars, the near misses, the personal loss, all there. It was tracked live to vintage analog gear at Power Play Studios in Zurich using a 70s era Disney console, and each song feels unfiltered. Please welcome British guitarist with Cardinal Black, Mr. Chris Buck, to Interviewing the Legend. Hello, Chris.
Hey, Ray, how's it going? Thank you for having me.
Great, man. Let me tell you, I love this album. It's incredible.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's about time we have a well-polished band with great lyrics and a different feel. You know what I mean?
It's the first time we've ever been accused of being well-polished. I can guarantee that much. But thank you.
I really, you guys sound so mature and seasoned. And you guys haven't been around that long.
Well, it's a bit of a misnomer, I guess. I mean, technically speaking, we launched in 2021, so we've just had our 4th birthday, actually. Tell Me How It Feels, the debut single that you mentioned, was in May of 2021. So, I mean, 4 years feels like an absolute lifetime in this band, to be honest. But there's a lot of shared history there. We were a band going back to about 2009, 2010. And we did that for a little while, and we tried to do the kind of creative differences, acrimonious split, and you never want to speak to you again, but also realized that simultaneously to that, we were also in a wedding band. So if we wanted to make some money on a Saturday night, we had to kind of put our differences aside. So we did that for a while, and we had a lot of fun doing that. And I guess consequently, it kind of always felt a little bit like unfinished business. It always felt like there was this kind of reservoir of material that we not really utilized to its fullest extent. And fast forward to 2021, and kind of under the cover of COVID, really, we started getting together again and rehearsing. Maybe not, I don't know, at a point where maybe not entirely legal to do so, at least the distance apart at which we were, but c'est la vie. So 2021 was our kind of big sort of relaunch, I guess. And, the kind of COVID situation gave us a chance to kind of regroup, refocus on what it was that we wanted to do and how we wanted to do it, and just gave us a chance to kind of get all of our ducks in a row as well. Inevitably when a new band launches, this whole kind of thing of new music coming soon, big things coming soon, kind of tune in, etc., etc. but we had a chance just to make sure that everything was kind of there and ready to go. So when we launched, we had a kind of small line of merchandise, we had music videos, we had the EP kind of already recorded and in the works. So yeah, it gave us a chance to get our ducks in a row. So yeah, that was 4 years ago, and it feels like it's been a bit of a whirlwind ever since, to be honest. So
I'm going to read a couple of quotes from you guys. This one's from Tom. It's a long shared history we have. We feel like we've paid our dues, and this album is the culmination of all of that effort. That's from Tom. You said it turned out lockdown was a blessing in disguise when the decision was made to reactivate the band as a four-piece under the name Cardinal Black. And then the album is an honest account of some of the highs and lows we encountered and the stories we found along the way. Very deep and emotional lyrics. There it is. Very deep and emotional lyrics.
I think,
but every track.
Oh, thank you very much. I think the second album, this album feels much more personal and much more of a kind of reflection of where we're at, I guess. Not just as a band, but as human beings as well. Individually and collectively. I think the first record, by virtue of it having been written over quite a prolonged period of time, there were a couple of new tracks on the first record that maybe dated back 6 months prior to recording the album. There were a couple of tracks which were the better part of 15 years old, So we went into the recording process of that first record kind of reconciled with the idea that it was always going to feel like a greatest hits record of songs that nobody had ever heard. It wasn't necessarily going to feel cohesive. It wasn't going to feel coherent as a record. It was going to feel like a collection of songs, Whereas the second record, having a clean slate, having this total blank canvas to go in and just write and be fairly prolific, I guess, in quite a short space of time. The second record, the writing process of which, it was really liberating. It scared the hell out of me initially because you get to the end point of touring that first record and you're creatively and emotionally and physically spent, from quite a prolonged kind of period on the road for us. And, the initial prospect of, right, all I want to do is go and lie down on a sun lounger somewhere. But no, can you go and write a second record, please? At which point you don't really feel like you have anything left in the tank. But thankfully for me, at the very least, I was kind of aware of that if this was going to work how the first record worked, I was probably going to be a 50% contributor. Me and Tom, the principal songwriters. I needed to get my arse into gear and kind of find some songs. And at least initially, the fallback plan that I had, which thankfully worked quite well, was to go through a drawer, dig out a load of old iPhones, and just start going through the old voice memos on my phones. Because whenever I have an idea, I just record it into my voice memos. I'm not one of these people like Tom is to a degree, where Tom can just sit down at a piano or with a guitar and kind of write something. We'll come up with something. It has to be a little bit more spontaneous for me, and it invariably strikes when you're least expecting it. But thankfully, I've been fairly kind of fastidious in putting these ideas down as and when they come. Sometimes it's me with an acoustic guitar. Sometimes it is literally me in a supermarket whistling into my phone, for an idea which at the time I'm sure seemed like musical genius. But 8 years on, when you're listening back to you whistling into your phone with zero context and, the kind of cashier on the checkout shouting at you in the background, it's not necessarily the best reflection of the idea that you had at the time. But at the very least, a couple of old ideas on some older phones got my creative juices flowing again and got me into that mindset of, okay, I'm up and I'm writing again, So yeah, it was a little bit daunting initially, but like I said, we were pretty prolific once we got going. The entirety of the record, I guess, was probably written in about 2 or 3 months. And and then we were straight into the studio. So the entire process was pretty quick, really.
You guys got a great start. I mean, the feedback on YouTube is incredible, and you guys have already toured the States, and you're gonna be back in the States again, which is unheard of for a young band. I mean,
to call our last trip a tour would be somewhat disingenuous. We did 3 shows. We dipped our toe.
Yeah, it's all
across the Atlantic, as it were. But this coming tour rather is a proper tour. It's a kind of full North American tour. We're
the big one.
We're hopping over the border very briefly into Canada, and then it's pretty much a kind of coast to coast job. So yeah, I'm super excited for it. But the response to the band in general, but particularly in the US, just absolutely blows our mind. The fact that we can come over as a relatively new band. book venues like the Basement East in Nashville and the Troubadour in Los Angeles and have those sell out, kind of well in advance is just incredible. So, it seems like the US seems to be a particularly kind of strong point for our music, I guess.
Great. That's wonderful. I interview a lot of prog bands from all over the world.
Yeah.
Excellent prog bands. And it takes them a long time to come to the U.S. I mean, for a prog band overseas to come to the U.S., it's like a really big deal. So,
it's unfortunately, I guess, obviously it seems that's which way the wind is blowing for us to kind of take us across the Atlantic. Unfortunately, it's quite expensive to do so.
It is.
Visas and just, I guess, the fact that we're so far away to begin with, flights are not cheap, et cetera, et cetera. It's unfortunate you're not a little bit closer than you actually are, to be honest. And you're a fairly big country, it turns out, as well. So I think the shortest drive we have on the tour is about 6 hours. The longest is probably about 17 hours, maybe, between Atlanta, Georgia, and Austin, Texas. And then we have to do pretty much the same length drive the next day up to Phoenix. So, if we don't hate one another already, we probably will after a month in a minibus. So we'll see how we get on.
You guys have a lot of people on your side and a lot of great musicians on your side. And your number one is Slash, and of course, Myles Kennedy. You got up and actually played with Slash. I think you did a blues number on YouTube with them. Yeah. What does it feel like for you to get up and play with probably one of your heroes?
Oh, absolutely one of my heroes. I mean, not one of my heroes, my hero.
Your hero?
For all of my formative years as a guitar player, it was Slash that I obsessed over, and thankfully I stopped just about short of buying a top hat. But pretty much everything else was trying to kind of emulate Slash in some small way. So to get up and actually do that and kind of experience that and now be lucky enough to call him a friend, is absolutely surreal in the extreme. But he's awesome. He's such a genuine, sweet and lovely guy. He facilitated us coming over to the US last year. He wrote our letter of recommendation for our visa application. He put in a good word for us to get the Troubadour show. So he's awesome. He's such a nice guy and incredibly generous with his time, when, quite frankly, he has much better things to be doing than bothering with me. So
but I think that veteran musicians want to see the young guys make it, and they want rock and roll to continue.
Yeah, I think
that's on the radio nowadays. I mean.
Absolutely. It's the music industry is, it's the age-old cliche, I guess, to say the music industry is not what it was.
Right.
I think in some ways it's actually better. The kind of gatekeepers of old have kind of disappeared, and thanks to social media and stuff like that, you can plow your own furrow without having to kind of wait for the yes or no of Mr. Big, as it were, And it's through social media really that I got my start. I started uploading videos of myself to YouTube when I was probably about 16, which is through an inadvertent route. Then is how Slash found me, or how Slash was introduced to me. So it's it isn't what it is, and I think internally indebted to people like Slash for putting his neck on the line and recommending us to the US immigration to be able to come into the country, or for booking us a show at the Troubadour, saying so many nice things about us. So it is nice, and it is incredibly rewarding to see someone that I count very much as a hero say so much nice stuff about us.
Awesome. I love it when music legends, they're very nervous around their heroes. Like, I taught, John Anderson from Yes, right?
Yeah.
He was talking to either Paul McCartney or George Harrison. I said, well, John, how did that go? He says, I was so nervous, I couldn't hardly talk to him. I says, you're John Anderson, lead singer from Yes. Why are you nervous? Because he's a Beatle. He's a Beatle. Exclusively the four people on the planet who anyone in the world would probably be somewhat nervous to meet. It's there's not much that really kind of trumps a Beatle, to be honest. Ride Home. It's a song that will appease any genre. As a matter of fact, the whole album will appease any genre, which is really cool. I thought Ride Home sounded like a hit. Like I was saying before, I was a top 40 DJ back in the late 70s. So I played a lot of hits. And this one sounded like a hit to me.
Oh, thank you. That was an unusual one for us. We that That was a fairly late addition to the process, really. I remember me, Tom, and Adam were kind of finishing up at a rehearsal, and we were very much done for the day, and I had this chord progression, super simple chord progression that actually, referencing earlier, coming across old demos on my phone, that was a demo probably dating back to about 2014, maybe. It was just like a super simple idea I had saved on a phone. And I'd stumbled across it the day before we had rehearsal. So it was kind of in the back of my mind, and Adam started playing something. I think Adam had been to watch a Nate Smith drum clinic, an amazing drummer that he's a big fan of, and he'd been to watch him the day before, and he was kind of playing around with some grooves, which he'd seen Nate kind of demonstrate. So Adam started playing something, and the track which I'd had in the back of my mind just kind of fell into place over the top of it. And I've got a recording of it on my phone, just of that rehearsal session, and you can hear the track pretty much go from inception to virtually completed in the space of about 5 minutes. There are not many, you don't get many spontaneous moments like that as a songwriter, at least I find anyway. It tends to be a little bit more labored and a little bit more of a process that you go through.
Sure.
But this took shape so quickly that just something then is kind of, you're sensing that someone or something is telling you, oh, you might want to pursue this. This is quite cool. So we were so late into the process that we didn't really have much chance to actually work on it from that point onwards until we got to the studio. So sonically, at the very least, it kind of took shape in the studio. And I remember we kind of got to the end of the track, and it felt like it was kind of into the outro or coda or whatever you want to call it, and it needed something a little bit different. And I mean, as a guitar band, principally, I guess the natural go-to at a lot of points is, oh, does it need a guitar solo? And I was pretty adamant. I was like, this isn't a guitar solo song. This, it would detract from it if I tried to start playing a guitar solo. What can we put there? And it kind of reminded us, in its simplicity, it kind of reminded us a little bit of like maybe a Paul Simon kind of Graceland kind of track.
Right.
And we thought, well, obviously kind of Paul Simon went big in on the kind of African influence for that track. We don't want to do that because we'll just be stealing then from Paul Simon more than we are already. What can we do? And as you referenced earlier, we were in Switzerland recording the record. So we're like, well, are there any kind of traditional Swiss instruments we could kind of, utilize? And Cyril, our producer, who is Swiss, recommended the Alphorn, which I'd never heard of, but is this absolutely massive instrument which kind of makes this particularly strange noise. We're like, well, I don't think that's the vibe. That's the kind of vibe that we're looking for. And Tom, I think it was, suggested bagpipes.
Right.
Which, at a very, very tenuous level, I guess, being a Welsh band, there's some Celtic connection in there somewhere, being a Scottish instrument principally. So we're like, oh, cool, we'll have to try and get some bagpipes on it. And we kind of retired then to the sort of residential part of the studio that night. And we're a little bit worse for wear. We're playing pool. We're kind of having a couple of drinks, relaxing after the day. And someone suggested, oh, well, the only person that we know who actually plays bagpipes is actually a politician. Or he was communications director for Tony Blair's government in the UK. Rewind the kind of late 90s, early 2000s. A guy by the name of Alistair Campbell, who over here at the very least has an absolutely massive podcast called The Rest is Politics, which just talks politics, etc., etc. And we're all absolute losers. We love the Rest is Politics podcast. So we'd heard him on there mention the fact that he played bagpipes. So we're like, I wonder what's the odds of being able to get Alistair Campbell to play bagpipes. As I said, we were quite drunk in the studio, or at least above the studio at this point. So one slightly drunken Instagram message later, a couple of hours later, I wake up to a message of Alistair Campbell saying, yeah, cool, I'll play bagpipes on your record. So lo and behold, then a couple of weeks later, we booked a studio in North London and had him in to play bagpipes. So it kind of felt like it rounded off the whole kind of the vibe of that track, which was just a little bit fun, a little bit throwaway, a little bit kind of wild, and sonically at the very least quite different to the rest of the record. And we thought, what's a good way of putting the icing on that cake is to get some bagpipes of all instruments.
It works. It really works.
No, thank you.
That the song is about, it's a you watch going off to war when you see turn later as a man. True?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, South Wales in particular, I had so many friends who left school at 16 and went and joined the army. Right. Tom has got a lot of friends still in the British military, so is much closer to that. Tom principally writes the lyrics. So Tom is much closer to that kind of experience of lots of friends going off to war or going off to, foreign lands. I think that, even though he's not done that himself, he's been quite affected by that, by seeing so many of his friends do it,
Right.
And still has a lot of friends in the military. So, it's written from the perspective, I guess, of someone going off to war at quite a young age and kind of and the experience of that and how that affects you. So it's an outlier on the record in pretty much every respect, really. But it kind of, once it had that introduction as well, that kind of Beatles-esque looming kind of mellotron part, we thought there's nowhere else on the record this can go other than to actually start the record. So for a somewhat unusual track, it ended up being the kind of sort of de facto intro, really, which was strange.
You got many of these tracks are already music videos, which is cool, and they're great music videos. One of them is Racing Cars, which to me sounds like it's like slow R&B type stuff. There's a lot of R&B influence in a lot of these tracks, and it's
I think so. Thank you.
Yeah, this comes from the vocals, and
I mean, Tom has got that kind of big soulful voice, I guess.
Right, he does.
Ironically, I think a lot of people, especially since we've started doing press for this record, a lot of people have picked up on the fact that he kind of sings in a bit of a transatlantic way. So it's bizarrely, when you hear him talk, he has a very strong, much like myself, a very strong Welsh accent. That all but disappears when he sings.
Amazing, isn't it?
It's not so much, speaking for him here, that's not really a conscious effort. That's just something that happens through your influences, and who you aspire to kind of sing like when you're younger and then when you get older. And for him, it's that kind of great American songbook thing. It's great songwriters like James Taylor, or it's, Paul Simon. It's these kind of classic American kind of, infused songwriters. And as such, his voice ends up sounding a little bit kind of somewhere in the middle of the Atlantic, So,
yes.
But yeah, there's a lot of blues influence, there's a lot of soul influence. That's, I guess, the underpinning sound of the band ultimately.
Breathe, which is a slow ballad. Vocals. Yeah. How would that sound like? It sounded like it was
cool.
kind of an 80s rock.
Yeah. That was an unusual one to record. We were kind of, there's very few kind of tense points with Cardinal Black. We've been in a band with one another, or we've been friends for so long that there's not many moments where it's ever in danger of an argument erupting or coming to blows, God forbid. But Breathe was one of those few moments in the studio where there was a little bit of a disagreement in regard to kind of what direction it should take. I wrote the music for that track and kind of went into the studio thinking, this feels a little bit kind of almost like something off Dark Side of the Moon. Quite spacey, quite dramatic, quite kind of ambient in one way or another. And I thought that kind of needs to be the kind of direction that we take that in. It had a guitar part which had been inspired by a guitar pedal, actually, a weird delay pedal with kind of like a jumping kind of octave thing that you can kind of hear roughly in the background. So that very much set the tone for that track, and we went into the studio with me at least thinking this was going to be a Dark Side of the Moon outtake, and just by virtue of everyone having a different image or a different kind of picture of how that track should sound, it ended up sounding how it now sounds on the record, which is still quite spacey and a little bit kind of out there, but a little bit more kind of rooted in that R&B thing, bit more pop, bit more kind of rock, I guess. So that's the reality of being a songwriter in a band where everything is, for the most part, collaborative. It's all well and good you having an idea and having particularly fixed views on how you want something to sound. It won't end up sounding like that because the rest of them will get their hands on it and ruin it, he says, somewhat jesting.
On London, because you've got a special guest on that.
Well, it's strange. So
Molly, right? Windsor?
Molly Windsor, yeah. So she's in the music video. So So Molly is incredible actress who bizarrely kind of we realized was a fan of ours. We noticed her at a gig, rewind probably about 18 months or so ago, maybe, and I'd not long watched a program here in the UK, which I'd seen her in. Me and my wife had watched it. She was incredible in it. A program called Cheat, and I remember being on stage and looking down and kind of thinking, God, that looks like that actress. And lo and behold, it was. So we got chatting on Instagram after and kind of stayed in touch. And she's one of BAFTA. She's quite a high flying actor, and we just thought, well, if this industry has taught me anything, it's that if you don't ask, you don't get. When we supported Myles Kennedy, for example, that was me reaching out to Myles directly on Instagram and saying, I don't suppose you need a support band. I see you're coming to the UK. You've not announced support yet. If you need a band, let us know. We're here. And amazingly, for the first time in history, that type of message actually yielded something. And he got back saying, yeah, cool, let's do it. And same with Molly. We were like, Molly's all over Netflix. She's got an incredibly busy schedule, but what's the odds she would want to be in some Tin Pot Band's music video? And lo and behold, she said yes. So, we're forever indebted to Molly. And then for all of her incredible acting capabilities, we essentially just made her run around a lot for the music.
Yes.
So I don't think we kind of we put it fully to use, to be honest. But we kept her fit, if nothing else. It's strange that track, I guess, by virtue of its title, seems to have been picked up a lot on like sports playlists and stuff like that. Right. So it's on a lot of football playlists here in the UK and stuff like that. Because I guess in a very literal sense, keep on running. You could interpret that as I don't know, some sort of like motion. But the actual lyrical content of that track is Tom knew a girl in university who was being stalked, and I guess now it's kind of a much more kind of widely spoken about subject. But back then it was just kind of like, oh well, that's happening. Nobody really kind of knew what to do or what to acknowledge or what to what to kind of take any action to do with. So it always brings a somewhat wry smile to my face that quite a dark track has been sort of adopted as a bit of a football anthem in certain quarters. So still, you never know.
That's why she's running everywhere. Morning Light and Holding My Breath. You know who Tom sounds like, or he reminds me of? Bob Seger.
Oh, cool. Well, I'm in particular a big Bob Seger fan.
Kind of a Bob Seger feel to it,
I think Tom is a Bob Seger fan as well, so that may very well stand a reason. But Hollywood Nights is one of my favorite albums of all time. Is it? I think the second track is Feel Like a Number, is it? Because I think
I think so.
Hollywood Nights is the first track. Yeah, that's such a great record. That was my father's influence, turning me on to Bob Seger. So I guess that influence is knocking around in there somewhere. But I think Morning Light for me is probably my favorite track on the record. At least I think probably Ride Home pips it in terms of just Ride Home is. Yeah, I guess it's more of a traditional kind of guitar track, Morning Light, but it's it probably feels like it kind of encompasses where we are as a band at the moment in terms of our songwriting, our sound generally, kind of where we feel like we're heading in terms of songwriting and sound generally. So Morning Light is a particular favorite of mine, but unfortunately I can't claim any credit for that one, so that's Tom's. Push Pull was a strange one. So that again, actually, that was a demo that I had on an old iPhone. At least musically, that well predated my dad's passing. Just a very simple kind of chord progression and melody, and it was one of the ideas that I kind of came across, and I thought, that's quite cool. That I could use that in some capacity. So I started working on it, and as I referenced earlier, I don't tend to get involved in the lyrical content of the tracks. I'm always conscious that as much as I feel like I maybe can write lyrics, Tom is the guy that has to sing them, and Tom has to be comfortable with not just the lyrical content, but the way they flow and the way they are to literally, in a pragmatic sense, the way those words are able to be sung. And because I'm not a singer, I maybe don't write in a particularly kind of comfortable way for Tom to sing those lyrics. So I kind of very much leave Tom to that. But I sent Tom a demo of Push Pull in a very early stage, and I was kind of a little bit torn over the idea that it needed a chorus or it needed something to kind of take it to another point at something. So I sent over a demo with attached onto the end of that demo what I thought was going to be a chorus. And Tom straight away listened to it and came back, said, I really like that. That sounds more like a middle eight to me though. But I'd sung some words over it, which is such a rare occurrence for me. I don't really get involved, as I said, in any kind of lyric writing, but I'd sung some words, and Tom obviously listened to them and then asked me about them and kind of said, I'm guessing that's about your dad. And I was like, I honestly don't know. They were just words that came to me in the spur of the moment. And that's what I stuck down on that demo. And Tom, to his, it was so raw and so fresh at that point. My dad had only passed probably 3-4 weeks maybe, ago while I was writing that track, that I don't think, and still now even, I wouldn't be able to write a song about my dad. It's too close. It's too, kind of too connected to that situation to be able to kind of eloquently express yourself. So Tom, to his eternal credit, went away and kind of, Tom is not a man that lacks for confidence, should we put it like that? And then I've never seen him so nervous as coming into rehearsal the next time and kind of tentatively saying, I hope you don't mind, I've written the rest of that song about your dad. I was like, yeah, not at all. And we did it for the first time in rehearsal, and it was quite a moment, and just, incredibly proud of how that turned out. And like I said, Tom expressed my thoughts on the situation infinitely more eloquently than I ever could, I think, and that's probably because of how close me and Tom are, but also how many conversations we had on the subject. You know, my dad had been ill for a while. He had a brain tumor. So you kind of, as much as you're never ever fully prepared for the death of a parent, you know, you can know, someone could tell you to the day and to the minute when they're going to die, and you would still never be prepared for that. I was kind of prepared, and I'd seen it come in, and you knew exactly what was going to happen. So I think through conversations that me and Tom had at length, you know, he was able to more eloquently express how I felt than I ever would have been able to. So yeah, I'm eternally indebted to Tom for that one.
I noticed Adeline. That's a very cool message in that song as well. It's a love letter from a father to his daughter. You know, I have a daughter that's going to be turning 40 soon. So, you know, that song really touched me.
I'm sure Tom's will as well. At the rate she's growing up, it won't be long until Tom's is as well. She's 4 at the moment, but I think she'll be 40 soon. It's I mean, being a musician, again, not to put words in Tom's mouth, but again, we've had endless chats about this. You know, it's a strange. Being a musician is a strange way to try and make a living. You know, it's not the most sociable of hours. It's not the most sociable profession in any respect, really. You spend a lot of time away, whether that's recording, whether it's writing, you know, or whether it's touring. You know, like this year, for example, from about August through to December, you know, we'll be away. I have a little boy who's pretty much exactly the same as Adeline, Tom's daughter. So it is hard, you know. It's it takes a lot to justify it to yourself, and you know, especially to be able to explain that to a child who's not really able to understand that yet. You know, understand why Daddy goes away for such long periods. You know, and obviously,
exactly.
First world problems. There's guys in the military who disappear for 6 months, you know, and get deployed. Yep. It's not a problem that's unique to musicians by any stretch, but it doesn't make it any easier, you know, to try and explain that. So yeah, even though I didn't write Adeline, I can entirely, you know, kind of understand where Tom is coming from on that song, because it's thoughts that I have all the time. You know, will I be good enough? Can I reconcile this? Can I find a way to make it work? You know, so
I need more time. You know, like I said, every track tells a story, you know, and very emotional story. This one's about a boy waiting for a girl, waiting for each other's lives to realign. People change, but hardly ever simultaneously. And usually the cuts are deeper person. And this is an official video that also stars a 1965 Ford Mustang.
yeah. Driven on the wrong side of the road, as everyone's been very quick to point out. I think we scared a couple of our American viewers there driving it on the left-hand side of the road. But yeah, that was an experience shooting that music video. We basically wanted to try and capture a little bit of the kind of California coast, but in Wales, which is never particularly going to go exactly as planned. So the weather was inclement, is probably a diplomatic way of putting it, for the most part. And the car matched the weather in that the guy who was kind enough to loan us the car, you know, kind of came down with very big statements of, oh, it's been, you know, impenetrable, it never goes wrong. So then, of course, the first thing it does is break down. So there was a little behind the scenes video that we put out on Instagram and Facebook the day after of us push starting the car pretty much any time we needed to get a take. We'd have to kind of give it a bump start. So yeah, it was an interesting day, that. And I don't know whether we particularly captured the Californian vibe, but at least we had the car to kind of go on anyway. Yeah. So if not the weather or reliability.
Well, the album ends with "Your Spark blows me to pieces." Rousing closer. It's great. It's a heartfelt tribute to Tom's wife. Like a thank you, I guess, to his wife. It's an official video. Another beautiful song. Another beautiful track.
Oh, thank you.
I gave the album 5 stars.
You know, I'm proud of this record. You know, I'm pleased with the way it turned out, and you know, it was we made such a conscious decision that this album needed to be a step up from the first in pretty much every capacity, whether that was audio quality, whether it was songwriting, whether it was how personal and meaningful it was to us as songwriters. Just the songwriting generally, we made a very kind of conscious decision early on to try and up our game. So yeah, it means a lot that it seems to be resonating with people. So thank you.
You guys have done some amazing things in your short span that you guys have been together. One thing you did was you played at Abbey Road Studios, right?
Yeah.
Which is very cool. Studio 2. You were also invited.
As a Beatles fan.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Sorry, man. As a Beatles fan, that was surreal in the
Oh my gosh, I can imagine. You were also invited to the Joe Bonamassa for the Keeping the Blues Alive rock cruise, and you were there with Blackberry Smoke, Kenny Wayne Shepherd, who's been on the show. Joe's been on the show, Bonamassa as well. So that was pretty cool.
That was awesome. That was a decadent week, to put it mildly. Essentially, a week of constant eating and drinking, with a little bit of music thrown in between. So that was good fun. So
that's great.
Thank you to Joe for destroying my liver.
Really? That's funny. Here's your final question. I don't want this to disappear, so I want to make sure we get a good solid interview here. I ask everybody this question, and I get some interesting answers. One of my favorite movies is Field of Dreams. So it's
Kevin Costner.
It had a Field of Dreams wish, like in the movie, to perform with, collaborate with anyone from the past or present. Would that be?
Oh, it's a great question. My father was a huge Beatles fan, and in particular, a John Lennon fan. John Lennon was his hero, and I think that's kind of rubbed off on me to some extent. You know, I mean, there are bigger musical influences that I've had personally. I guess, you know, Guns N' Roses, Slash was a huge, you know, and continues to be a huge influence. But I think in terms of people that I would love to have just met or been able to have collaborated with in some respect, probably, I don't know. As much as I want to say a Beatle, I'm conscious that, you know, kind of referencing a discussion earlier, that I would probably turn into a puddle of myself on the floor if I ever met Paul McCartney or ever met Ringo. I was extremely lucky a couple of years ago. The night before Paul McCartney headlined Glastonbury Festival in the UK, he did a tiny little intimate warm up show at a venue called the Cheese and Grain in a place called Frome, which is very near Glastonbury, and it's pretty near where I live. And I saw the announcement go up saying, you know, kind of Paul McCartney's doing a secret surprise warm up show. Tickets are available exclusively from the box office. So you have to drive and get there. And by the time I saw it, you know, the announcement had been up like 10 minutes, and there was already a huge queue of people snaking around the car park. So I thought, with the best people in the world, even if I drove there in a rocket ship now, it's going to be sold out by the time I get there. And lo and behold, about 2 minutes later, big poster, sold out.
Sold out.
But I was racking my brains then thinking, who do I know? Who could I try and get into this gig through? And I know Brian Ray, his guitar player, at least on Instagram anyway. We've been Instagram buddy, who's spoken a little bit on Instagram. Right. So I dropped him the most ballsy, cheeky message that I will ever drop anyone, and say, any chance of any guest list for me and my father. My father was still around, and my father, obviously being a massive Beatles fan, I didn't tell him until the day, and it was coincidentally my father's birthday as well. Was the day of the show.
Goodness. So that's great.
Brian, to his eternal credit, came back saying, yeah, no problem, and got me on the guest list. So me and my dad drove down to see Paul McCartney. We were in the front row.
Oh my goodness!
4 foot away from Paul McCartney in a room full of about 300 people.
Oh wow!
It was incredible, and as much that is testament to the fact that, as much as I like to think I would be able to collaborate with the Beatle, I went a little bit weak at the knees just standing in front of Paul McCartney as a fan. So how viable any of that would be, I don't know. But let's say Paul McCartney, because I think, you know, he's undisputed genius.
Yeah, you know, that's the number one answer. Is Paul McCartney.
Oh, is it really? I wish I could have been more. Original.
I had Julian on the show, and I asked him the same question, and he said his father. Played with his father.
I've spoken to Julian quite a lot on Instagram. He seems like an incredibly
He's a nice guy, really good guy, very big in photography.
Of course, yeah. But
I think he's more into that than music.
I think so, yeah. And he gave most of Britain the fright of its life the other day by posting a photo. I think most of the stuff that he does is in black and white. It's in monochrome. And he posted a photo wishing there's a naturalist over here, a very famous kind of zoologist and biologist called David Attenborough, who does these kind of wildlife programs. And David Attenborough is 99, maybe?
Yeah, I know him. Yeah.
He's become a British institution, you know.
Sure.
He's very much part of the fabric of Britain at this point.
Yep.
And to wish David Attenborough a happy birthday the other day, he posted a black and white photo of David Attenborough, to which me and I think most of Britain that saw that had our heart in our mouths momentarily, thinking he'd actually passed away. But thankfully, it was just a black and white photo wishing him a happy birthday. So yeah, I was a bit hasty there. But, Julian's awesome.
I love Julian's music ever since the beginning, since he, with all those great songs.
And the story of how he kind of got there as well. Like, he didn't really trade on his surname.
He didn't get any help.
Yeah, absolutely. Which, is testament to his talent.
Exactly. It would have been nice to see him and his father together.
Yeah, that'd be amazing. Yeah, the older he gets, the more he looks like his father as well. He's the spit of John.
On the phone, he sounds just like John.
Oh, no way.
Exactly, man.
I can imagine that's a bit surreal.
It's pretty cool. So what's next for Cardinal Black? You got this huge tour. Let's see. So May 25th, right? Is that when it starts?
Yeah, so we've got a kind of in-store week around the UK. We're doing kind of run of in-stores to promote the records, and then a little bit of a lull, and then it pretty much all kicks off in August. We fly over to New York as the first show. All around the US. I say all around the US. Obviously, Florida is a glaring omission, but we're looking to rectify that next time. For Texas states, I'm desperate to go to Louisiana, to New Orleans, and all that kind of stuff. So the plan is basically to kind of come over this summer, play as many sold out shows as possible, and come back next year, do some bigger shows, do some festivals, and kind of whether you want us or not, we'll be back, I think is the plan. So and then a big UK tour, and then a big European tour to finish the year. So yeah, like I said earlier, I'm not going to be home very much between August and December.
Ray Shasho's Rockstar Chronicles is a fantastic journey through the history of the world's most influential music and the artists who lived it. Ray's superior knowledge of the era, the players, studios, and the great music that came to be are all brought to life in this fantastic book. I definitely recommend this for all serious readers of the genre. It makes an excellent gift for the classic rock historian, and is a great way to relive the moments in music by those who created them. Over 45 intimate conversations with some of the greatest music artists of our time. The Rockstar Chronicles is available at bookbaby.com and amazon.com.